to get in front of this as these embers are just ripping across the landscape here.
KCRA, where the news comes first. And for the past 60 years, there has been a lot of news to cover. April 1973, a train carrying thousands of bombs destined for the Vietnam War caught fire at the Roseville rail yard. The explosions continued for more than a day and could be heard all across the Sacramento area and beyond. 1976, the small Central Valley farm town of Chowchilla. 3 men kidnapped a busload of children and buried them in a moving van at a Northern California quarry. The kids and their bus driver managed to escape. Their kidnappers went to prison.
As you can see by what's happening to the blinds in back of us, we're having an earthquake.
October 1989, just after 5 p.m., we were on the air when the Loma Prieta earthquake shook all of Northern California.
The upper deck of the Bay Bridge has collapsed.
Once again, KCRA provided some of the first images of the devastation to NBC, CNN, and others around the world.
These pockets of fire are just jumping all over the place.
2 years later, a fire fanned by strong north winds swept through the Oakland Hills. Before it was out, 25 people would lose their lives and nearly 3,000 homes would be destroyed.
In our next report, a death row inmate discusses a life of crime that leads to a final and violent and fatal shootout.
And when it came to covering big stories for KCRA, one name stands out among all the others.
When it comes to big stories, Mike Boyd was the legend when it came to news in Sacramento.
What is it that draws people to you?
Mike Boyd is probably the one journalist that I've met in my career in TV news that truly, absolutely loved his job.
Mr. Montalvo, what can you tell us about the murders?
And perhaps the story Mike Boyd is most remembered for is that of a Sacramento landlady who poisoned tenants of her boarding house on F Street, buried their bodies in the yard, and pocketed their Social Security checks.
They're looking for victim number 7 in the front yard of this home.
As the search for bodies continued, Dorothea Puente slipped away. An arrest warrant was issued, and days later, police caught up with her in Southern California.
We couldn't get a plane out of Sacramento because they were all booked. So our station decided to get a plane. So we got a plane, jumped on it. But when the cops said, hey, could you change the flight plan? We said, yes, go do it. They said, hey, we're going to pick her up.
The private jet we chartered to Los Angeles ended up being the plane that carried Dorothea Puente back to Sacramento. And on the way, she talked to us.
I have not killed anyone. I told you that. I have not killed anyone.
And then he was there the night the assassination of Bobby Kennedy.
For all of those at home viewing this, people here cannot believe it.
No, you didn't answer my question.
Mike Boyd hasn't been the only dogged reporter. KCRA3 took up the mantle of strong journalism from the beginning.
Ted Kaczynski, the serial bomber.
I remember the Unabomber because I knew the man that he killed in Sacramento.
We did have a bomb go off. I don't know exactly where. It's inside the building on the north side of I Street here.
Here in Sacramento, a bomb was planted that killed somebody. And there was not a good clue as to who, where, how.
JC, if you hear Mommy, I love you. And I want you to come home tonight.
A car raced by, cut her off, and 2 people inside snatched her.
So J.C. Lee Dugard, another one of those stories where you're just like, wow, I can't believe it.
J.C. Dugard was found alive in Antioch. Excuse me. She was found alive in Antioch.
Authorities now say that J.C. Dugard has been living for the past 18 years with the couple who abducted her from near her home in South Lake Tahoe when she was just 11 years old.
But the overriding feeling that detectives had at that time was, what went wrong? Because someone doesn't disappear that long without some red flags along the way that somebody didn't notice or somebody discounted, or why is that little girl in this backyard?
So we are announcing today a $50,000 reward for information that leads directly to the location and recovery of Lacey.
As the reporter who covered the Scott Peterson trial gavel to gavel, people still ask me, what was the fascination across America with that particular murder trial. And I think that the answer is that it was a mystery.
Scott wanted to be free. Lacey was like an anchor around his neck, and so he put one around hers.
When you had beautiful, pregnant Lacey Peterson disappearing right before Christmas, her handsome husband appearing to be frantically looking for her, and then arrested on murder charges. And it wasn't until we were about halfway through that trial that I think most people, including the jury, got some answers. And that's when his mistress took the stand.
And there were many other big stories, from a day-long hostage standoff at a Sacramento electronics store that came to an explosive ending with 3 of the gunmen and 3 of the hostages dead.
That was probably a night of terror that we had never seen before, and that is still called the largest hostage negotiation crisis in the United States history. 8 hours, 41 hostages, 6 people killed. There had never been anything like this before.
For someone my age, I've been through an awful lot.
To the kidnapping of a young newspaper heiress.
Well, the sign used to say we all deserve the freedom to marry, and now I've had to make one small change. We all have the freedom to marry.
And a landmark decision on same-sex marriage.
All gay people can now get married and be as happy as I am.
But sometimes, it's not the biggest story that connects with our viewers. Most often, it's the personal ones.
A couple summers ago, when the little girl died of a peanut allergy, and her parents, as grief-stricken as they were, they wanted to get that message out that food allergies are real and they're serious.
It was always my greatest fear, and that we're sitting here talking about it, it seems surreal.
And while the interview on television got a lot of exposure, there are still places that will repost that story from around the world.
I love the big stories, obviously, where we're on the front lines, but I'm going to be honest with you, my favorite stories are sometimes the quiet stories.
But for Joanne, now the nightmare is finally over. For 2 years, she's been trying to get one answer. Where is her daughter Sarah buried?
They are the stories where people come back to us. They either call us or they write. And they're the stories where people say, you made a difference in my life.